Throughout the history of boxing, there have been many fighters from many eras through many decades who have been expected from very early on to go on and achieve great things. Joe Louis, Muhammad Ali, Floyd Mayweather, Roy Jones, just to name a few. However, there have been other fighters from early on in their careers who were expected to do great things and ended up falling flat. In some cases, they ended up becoming journeymen. In other cases, they ended up becoming a parody of themselves. Today, we have 3 examples of hype jobs who faced reality. First up, we have a look at Prince Patel, at one point Britain's most hated prospect. Patel made a name for himself with interviews on IFL TV, and in those interviews from early on in his career showed a level of arrogance and cockiness unseen in British boxing.
That's why my name gets brought up every time you guys do an interview, because they're desperate for some of that Prince Patel ratings.
You would think a fighter with this kind of arrogance, with this much confidence, would have the skills to be able to justify such confidence, but you'd be wrong. Patel, albeit only one loss, had a draw in his 4th pro fight to a noted journeyman, and even on the cards he was on, he was featured quite low down the cards. His most infamous moment came when he was invited onto Steve Bunce's Boxing Hour. It was on this show where he abused and disrespected former WBO super featherweight champion Barry Jones.
Yeah. You don't want to be in fights like Barry where no one wants to watch you and the crowd ain't even interested in you.
Following on from this show, he was released from his contract with Queensberry and was forced to then take fights in Hungary against the lowest tier of opposition. But in 2018, IFL and Kugan Cassius made the brave decision to interview Prince Patel in the hope that maybe he'd been humbled. Had he? He certainly hadn't.
And it feels even better now to be back in front of the camera where a super sexy stud like myself belongs.
Following on, and again following his same pattern of fighting nobodies over in Hungary, he ended up finding himself in a world title fight. At least, that's how he perceived it. He found himself fighting for the vacant IBO Bantamweight world title against 1801 Michel Banquez. This was on July 12th, 2019, in a fight that Patel was cocky, in a fight that Patel was proclaiming himself the next world champion, in a fight in which he got absolutely outboxed, schooled and beaten over 12 rounds. Since then, he's gone on to have a draw against the fighter he already beat in a 5-minute round. Yeah, that's what Prince Patel is, and that's the level he's at. If this video does 1 million views, I will personally retract everything I said about Prince Patel. That's how confident I am that he's been exposed and he is going nowhere in the sport of boxing.
Because I am half man, half superhuman.
When Ohara Davis broke onto the scene in early 2016, promoter Eddie Hearn knew at the time he had himself a gem. He had a fighter with long reach, tremendous punching power, and more important than that, the ability to sell himself. Ohara Davis, never shy of a few words. Unfortunately for Ohara Davis, he didn't have a filter. Once he started attacking the fans who were paying his money, you knew something was up. And when he started getting into fights with fighters before they'd even get into the ring, because of the trash talking, you knew this kid was a disaster waiting to happen. Ohara knew, if I want to keep trash talking like this, I gotta keep winning. And keep winning he did, beating everyone Eddie Hearn put in front of him. But at the time in Britain, there was another 140-pound fighter who was making a name for himself, quietly going about his business. His name was Josh Taylor, an accomplished amateur with good boxing fundamentals. Josh Taylor already proved he was ahead of British level. Ohara Davis, on the other hand, wanted to prove that he was better than Josh Taylor. It seemed inevitable these two guys would meet, and meet they did. In the build-up, Ohara Davis was, as you would expect, full of trash talk, full of bravado, but on fight night, it all became clear. Josh Taylor put a beating on Ohara Davis, dropping him several times, completely outboxing him, outclassing him, and making Ohara Davis quit in the 7th. Ohara Davis proved in that fight that it's all well and good to have a big mouth, it's all well and good to have long reach and punching power if you know how to use it, but it only works at a certain level. If you don't have the ability, you ain't gonna go anywhere. Josh Taylor subsequently has gone on to become one of the best fighters in boxing, arguably pound number 1 in the UK, as well as on most people's top 10 pound for pounds, unifying and then becoming undisputed at 140 pounds. Ohara Davis's best claim to fame? Well, he won the golden contract and he lost to Jack Cattrall. That's about it for 2 tanks. Our last entry on this list is many people feel was not a hype job, but certainly was overestimated in his ability. I'm talking about Jarrett Hurd. Turning pro without a massive amateur background, Jarrett Hurd came up through relative obscurity, and if you look at his early pro career, a couple of close decisions, a split, a majority decision, nothing to indicate that he would go on to become a world champion. But, to his credit, that's exactly what he did. In February of 2017, he defeated Tony Harrison via 9th round TKO, in a fight where we really saw what Jarrett Hurd is all about. Is he a talented boxer? Not really. Is he a big puncher? Well, the jury's out there, but what he does have is physical strength and absolutely massive at the weight. Hurd would go on to defend his title against contender Austin Trout, before unifying in 2018 against Erislandy Lara, in a fight in which he narrowly escaped with a decision. But at this time, people were starting to put Jarrett Hurd on pound for pound lists, and in a division where you have guys like Brian Castano and especially Jamel Charlo, that's a bit premature putting this guy on pound for pound lists. He was given a run out on the undercard of Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury 1 against contender and challenger Jason Wellborn. Wellborn, a decent contender, but only at British level. He had never even set foot at world level. And in that fight, although Jarrett Hurd won, it became abundantly clear he wasn't ready for Charlo, he wasn't ready for the upper echelons of the division. Although coming through with the stoppage, the brakes were firmly put on Jarrett Hurd. Talk of Charlo was pushed back, and instead he was given a run out against contender Julian Williams, also known as J-Rock, in a fight in which Hurd was expected to win, and was expected to win comfortably. Well, it proved to be anything but. Hurd, whose really only skill was he was huge at the weight, well, this proved to be no advantage against J-Rock, who was able to deal with his physical strength, was able to drop Hurd, and was able to outbox him en route to a comfortable 12-round UD. Many people felt that that was the end of the Hurd story. Well, not quite. He came back in 2021 against contender Lewis Aries at middleweight, and in that fight, once again, he was beat. Hurd hasn't fought since, and although yes, he did win a world title, this was a guy on many people's top 10 pound for pounds, despite the fact he has no real boxing skill, he has no real ability, all he is a weight bull. Well lads and lassies, I hope you enjoyed this trip as we look at some of boxing's hype jobs. Believe me, this series will continue. If you could, smash the like button, show your support, share this video, and give me some suggestions in the comment section of hype jobs you believed in but ultimately fell by the wayside.